All right. Um, Hopefully everyone can hear me. If you guys can hear me, just let me know in the comments. Hey everyone, welcome to the interview with our Google engineer, Peter Locke. Peter, you there?
Yep. And I won't be able to see the comments, so I guess you're gonna have to dictate them to me.
Okay, that sounds good. I will do that. So cool. Thanks for joining us and sharing your wisdom with all of us today. I guess you want to give us like a brief background of like what you do, who you are.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm really pleased to be able to be here to help people realize their dreams and potentials for going into the tech industry, whatever capacity they want to, whether it's like software engineer, machine learning, even like graphic designers or whatever people have in their minds. My background is not a lot to it. I did an internship at Twitter, and I worked at Google. I was originally a computer engineering student from University of Toronto, and yeah, after I worked at Google for about a year, I left and started to pursue other interests.
Wow, that's awesome. And at Google, what was your role?
My job title was software engineer, and I worked in the machine intelligence organization. This further specific team I worked on was called machine perception, which is basically the team that handles the part of machine learning for understanding perception. So hearing, listening, etc. So not speaking. So I didn't do things like text to speech or translate. Specifically, I worked on vision related things. So object detection, image understanding, and other things specifically in the vision was what I was taking care of.
Okay. And was your goal always to get a job in sort of the machine learning aspect of things, or did you start off as like software and then sort of ended up there just by pure will?
Uh, I think I didn't I didn't set out to go into machine learning, like I guess from the very beginning. I didn't make it my resolve that okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to get this machine learning job at Google. That's not what I set out to do. I think what I was hoping for was something challenging, and along the way I had picked up some machine learning experience, and that kind of got me into the position that I ultimately took at Google.
I see. And I guess did you enjoy it, or I know you said you left after 1 year, but how did you feel about the entire like sort of day to day at Google? Like, what was your average day like? And what was the overall sentiment that you got from being there?
Good question. So I liked it a lot, uh, and it's not that everyone liked it. I think I liked it just because I chose to like it and because of who I am. And that's not to say anything bad about the company. I liked it because I didn't have to work many hours, so I would come into work really late and kind of just leave when I wanted. I had a lot of autonomy, so my team members and my managers trusted me that I would get my work done, and I would. So I kind of had the freedom to do it when I wanted. If I wanted to slack off on a weekday and maybe do a little extra work on the weekend, I was free to do that. Um, I had like unimaginable resources available to me. So specifically on the subject of machine learning, that's really important. I had tens of thousands of servers that I could use at will to do machine learning related research. All of these things were kind of, I think, like a gift. There are other things like rating resources. So a big thing in machine learning is being able to gather data from human confirmed data. So if you're trying to understand an image, what's inside an image, it's really helpful to have a human look over that image and say, oh, there's a cat in that image, there's a candle in that image. Google had an entire infrastructure for that. So all these things I had access to help drive my work, which is something I don't think I could get anywhere else. Knowing like the machine learning like capabilities of like other companies, I think Google is probably the best, and maybe Amazon is up there too. But yeah, it was very unique. If I was at any of the other top five, like Apple and Facebook specifically, because I know their situation really well, for what I was doing, they couldn't offer me a better workplace and resources than what Google did.
That's pretty interesting. It sounds like you had a lot of. It sounds like, I mean, you don't hear that at a lot of other companies where the engineers are like, yeah, I sort of got to come in when I want, to leave when I want, as long as I got my work done. What do you think, like, sort of attributed to that? Or, like, do you think they were just really lenient because you did really good work? Or are they that lenient with everyone? And on top of that, another question from the comments that Sumia actually asked was, why do you think companies have such low retention rates, especially the top companies?
Good question. Sudhir, I think you said?
Sumia.
Sumia. Okay,
Yeah.
Sumia. Good question. So I'll get to that right after I address your first question, which is, do they just let anyone, with that leniency? The truth is, it depends a lot. So it kind of depends on what your team dynamics and team culture is. So some teams are really okay with shifted hours and kind of working whenever you want, and other teams are more about, we're gonna have our daily stand-ups, we're going to have lunch together, and it's kind of a different team dynamic, and with that different team dynamic comes different standards. My team was definitely, and I think in general with machine learning, because it's very research oriented, specifically the team I was on, the machine intelligence team at Google, which at the time it was called research and machine intelligence. It was all very research oriented. You naturally don't have to kind of work together very closely with people. There's not a lot of blocking. So, if we were working together on a website, something I did on my side might, like, you might be waiting on it. Like, you might have to wait for me to, like, finish the About Me page before you can publish the rest of the website or something. So the entire team's waiting on you. Whereas for research, it's kind of like everyone's doing their own research, and then they present whatever findings they have at the end, and then they kind of see how they can integrate that into different Google products. Because of that, the nature of the work, I think there was more leniency in general. And specific to my case, in the beginning, for the first month or month and a half that I worked there, I didn't come in as late. So I maybe came in at like 9:30, 10:30 in the beginning, and left at like 6:30, kind of like the average worker. But because I consistently proved myself and the high standard of work that I delivered in that 1 to 1.5 months, I kind of allowed myself to slack a bit with my work timings, and no one minded that because I had a consistent quality of work, which wasn't correlated with when I came in or left the office.
Wow. And the other question with the retention rates?
So I think with that, with the retention, there's a lot of stuff that goes along with that. I think one thing is there's really, really strong desire for talent in Silicon Valley. So there's a lot of companies poaching employees from other companies. And I know how that's like happened to me. And because there's like a really, really strong um, need for this talent, companies will go to great lengths to try and get talent from other companies, because the best talent, if you think about it, is the person that's already employed. So there's that as one reason. Another reason is there's a bit of a culture in Silicon Valley for, you know, doing your own startup, doing your own thing. And I think that contributes to employees wanting to leave and pursue their own ideas and often sell it back to the companies that they were working for before.
That's pretty funny. Have you has anyone that you know never like gone away from the company to create something and then sort of came back as an acquisition of that company itself? Or like
Yeah. Do you want me to kind of name specific examples?
sure. I mean, if you're okay with that.
Um, Let me think about this. Uh, well, I guess I'm not going to name very specific examples, I guess, to respect the privacy of these people, but I know, for example, multiple people at Twitter. One person at Twitter, he left Twitter and then he created this specific um, solution, and then Twitter acquired his company, him and his co-founders later. I've actually worked with someone who left a company and he knew that the company needed something, and he knew the company didn't have the resources or the talent to build that thing. So the two of us built something together, and then we took that company on as a client.
Wow.
So this is a business partner of mine that was literally an example of what I'm talking about here. And apart from that, I've also heard like numerous stories of people doing stuff like this. They may not have necessarily sold it back to the exact same company, but more often than not, like that is the case, because when you think about it, when these like company sales happen, these people know who to call. Like they already have an in, they already have credibility. If they call up their manager, the manager knows like, oh, this was one of my best employees. Like the work he does is legit. Like I'm going to listen to him. Whereas normally the executives and top like VPs and stuff at these big companies, they get calls and emails all day with pitches. It's easier for ex-employees to sell something back to their companies because they have the connections.
I see. Wow, that's pretty cool. Just the fact that you can sort of, once you get into one of these companies, your path, and even before that, or even if you don't get into them, like there's so many different paths to sort of get into your dream company, or even like in a weird way make something while not actually being employed by them.
Yeah, that's I'm sure there are. Well, I know one person, actually, the person I mentioned with the Twitter thing. He actually swears by this. He Because he's done it twice already and planning to do it a third time. He just loves the big cash when he gets from the acquisition, so he just wants to go like leave the company, like build something and then sell it. It's like his way of life. Just like for many people, I guess the regular way of life is to go to school, graduate, and get a job. That's his like philosophy. So I definitely think it's kind of interesting when you kind of open yourself up and open up your network. You realize there's all these different philosophies out there that sometimes we're so accustomed to hearing about our own philosophies, and so I guess tunnel vision by them, that we kind of forget that there's a bajillion different ways of getting what we wanted.
Wow. Wow. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. What are some examples? I guess the biggest demographic being students that recently graduated or students that are in third or fourth year trying to get a job. What are some examples of limiting beliefs or ideas that these students might have in their head that might not be true, and once they sort of clear their mind of that idea, it would be a lot easier for them to go and get a role at one of their dream jobs, or become a machine learning engineer at one of them.
Nice. Yeah. A lot of limiting beliefs. Definitely one, I think, which I'm probably not going to address first, is like this idea of like needing work experience beforehand, and maybe someone didn't have work experience in their time in college or university. They didn't get the chance of doing internships, so that makes them um, discouraged on their ability to get a job. The need for work experience, I think, is a limiting belief. I think a huge limiting belief, actually, which came to mind just now, is this idea that I'm not smart and that I have to find some way of like getting this good job, even though I'm not smart. Um, I don't think everyone fits into this category, but I do know quite a few people go out into the world, especially in like this tech space, where they have this over their heads that like I'm not good enough, or I'm not like naturally smart for whatever reason, and because I'm not naturally smart, I have to either work really hard, or I need some kind of edge to be able to like get these really good and lucrative jobs. And at the end of the day, this like not being smart or not being naturally gifted or something is just a belief. Like spit on that, like dismiss that, and just be smart, like get smart. There's really nothing different between you and someone who's quote unquote smart, except the fact that you're telling yourself that you're not smart, and then you're behaving in line with that limiting belief. If you just stop telling yourself that and just like do really great, amazing things that smart people do, then I'm sure you're going to go on and one, be really successful and start achieving these things that quote unquote really smart people achieve. And two, you're going to feel like you deserve those things. You're not going to go into like these, if you do end up landing a job, you're not going to go in there feeling inferiority complex, which is a really big thing in Silicon Valley. Feeling like, oh, I have to, be careful, or I have to like watch my step and listen to what other people say, and like I'm here to learn. There's nothing wrong with being humble and like being there to learn and stuff. That's all fine, but there's different contexts in which you can think those thoughts, and when people think those thoughts from the context of inferiority, I think that's very limiting in how well they can perform once they do actually get to the job. Like they end up getting this really great job, and then they struggle to either move ahead or struggle to, be a really stellar employee. I think all of this is just rooted in this one belief that I'm just not smart, or I'm not like brilliant. You're all brilliant. Dismiss the idea that you're not and be brilliant.
So it sounds like a lot of what you're saying is like the bulk of the stuff that's actually preventing students from landing a job at a company like Google or one of the top 4 companies is not necessarily like their natural intelligence or whatever you want, being smart, or their current skills or anything. It sounds like it's more of a mindset thing.
I think I'm a firm believer that mindset has a really big role to play. And like we're talking about limiting beliefs. So if I said to you that, oh, Google's application deadline for software engineers this coming season, or like for 2019 new grads, has or has just ended yesterday, or it ended like, I don't know, April 30th, and now you believe that. Because of this belief, you're not going to apply for the job until next year, because you believe that, or you're either that, or your belief is going to change for you to believe that, oh, it actually didn't close April 30th. So just to be clear, I guess what I'm saying is, if I make you believe that Google isn't taking any new applications anymore, you're not going to, if you really truly believe that, you're not even going to bother applying because you believe that they're not taking any new applications. It means you're not going to go and check up on whether or not they're taking applications. Because if you were checking up, that means you're doubting your belief. So when you firmly believe something, you begin to act with that belief without even knowing it. And I think a lot of people have these really firm beliefs that they're not capable of certain things for certain reasons, and then they end up not even thinking, not even imagining that they can do something that's contrary to that belief.
I see. So pretty much what you're saying is because a lot of students might not believe that they're good enough to get a job at Google or land a job at one of the top 4 companies, it sort of causes them subconsciously to act in a way that makes that very belief true, sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy type of thing.
In a sense, it's almost like, I think a really good way for someone to find out what their beliefs are is when, if you were to tell someone else about a story of how like someone got a job at Google, and then that person's like, oh yeah, but they went to like a top tier school, or but they were just naturally really gifted, or but they had like internships. When that but comes, that's a limiting belief they had, and then that gives them reason to just accept why they don't have what they want.
I see.
So think in the past. I'm sure you've had these conversations more than I have, when people say, like, oh, I like want this job, or like I want to get this job, but this. What did they say after but? To me, it's usually, from what I remember, it's something like, but I don't have a referral, so I'm just gonna like get squashed just because I'm going through that online application.
Right.
But I don't come from like a top school or something, but I don't have a high GPA, which is like the most nowadays. This belief is like not as prevalent, but there was a time when people believed they needed like a good GPA to get these top jobs. So there's all these beliefs, and the truth is they're all false. If you dismiss those beliefs, if you really didn't believe them anymore, then you don't have any more reasons to not have the job anymore. And then what ends up happening is you end up getting the job because you end up seeing the opportunities and the path that's right for you to get the job. So yeah, maybe you do get a competitive edge from being like at a top tier school. It doesn't mean you need to be at a top tier school to get the job. The belief just puts this kind of cloud around the head that, okay, I'm at this disadvantage, and it just leads to self-sabotaging behavior versus like prevalent behavior. Because I definitely didn't go to like I didn't graduate from a top tier school getting the job. I didn't have like a PhD to get like this machine learning job, et cetera, et cetera. So I had every excuse in the world to like not get the job. So people kind of need to examine their beliefs and dismiss them, or like find a way to figure out why it's not true, and then like go down that way.
Wow, that's pretty powerful stuff, man. That's yeah, I think that would help a lot of students hearing something like that. We also, I guess, during while we were talking, had some questions in the comments. One question is, how do you think recent college grads can get into the data science field with big companies? Pretty much anyone who's self-learned, how would you recommend they, like, what would they have to learn, or what would they have to do to get like a data science or a machine learning job at like a big company if they don't, well, I guess just like you just said, don't have an education or a background in it, formal background.
Yeah, good question. I can think of a number of ways of doing that. One is, so what, I guess, here's a good question to start with. What are these companies looking for in these data science people that they're hiring? What are they looking for? Do you think you might know, Anthony?
Um, I mean, I guess they're well for data science, data scientists. Like I know, for example, my company, a lot of it actually came down to culture fit, but also actually at Intuit, like a lot of the data science did either have like a background in terms of like a boot camp or something like that, or like a mathematics slash like master's uh, uh, degree. Like a lot of the people that were data scientists and machine learning people at my old company, a lot of them were actually people with masters or PhDs or some sort of like formal like outside education.
So that's one way you can get a data science job. I mean, is that out of the question? So, so someone asked, they're a fresh grad and they want a data science job at these companies. Is doing a master's degree a viable path for them?
I guess so. I mean, if you're still here, Rithvik, in the comments, let us know.
Because that's obviously one path. I think the two of us at least can agree upon, because I share the same sentiment. I know a lot of people that were in these positions that had some formal graduate study in the area, and that's totally like, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. That's a viable path. Now, if someone's asking, how can I get this data science position without having to go through that formal study, then there's a number of other things you can concoct in your head. If I were to just come up with ideas, let's say not having information, what I would think about is trying to see if I can get the same level of credibility that these people with these master's degrees have. So it could be that I come across a professor in data science and I tell him or her that I am going to like volunteer work for some project, for some data science project or research, and in exchange, if I produce work at a certain quality, then he or she, the professor, will give me a letter of recommendation to go with my application, which I can also list in my resume that I did this data science related work with this person for 3 months, and this came with it. Did the person in the comment ask for specific learning resources? What was the comment again?
Yeah, so at the end he says, he also says any suggestions as in online courses. He specifically said he wanted to self-learn it, so I guess that takes like like a graduate degree or something out of the picture.
Okay, so yeah, self-learning, that's a great question. So if I were to address the self-learning aspect of this, what I would do is I would take the Andrew Ng machine learning course on Coursera. It's free. It's self-paced, I believe. I think there's a self-paced version. There might also be a non-self-paced version. I don't think it's the best course out there, but I have familiarity with the course, and I know the course is very good. So it's a good starting point. And the purposes of taking that course are specifically to learn just the absolute basics, the bare minimum you need to be able to learn everything else you need to know. So when you take that course, after that, what you want to do is you want to go and you want to build something specific from scratch. And it can be anything that you think is eye-catching or will look good on a resume. So not just like another recommendation engine. right? There's like a bajillion of those out there. That's like a to-do list for someone like trying to prove their JavaScript skills. It's very basic. Something that's a little out there, knowledge from this Andrew Ng course, and you think of something interesting, and if you need ideas, you can go to kaggle.com, KAGGLE.com. It's a website to find interesting problems to solve, and then you just go and you solve one of those problems. And from that one machine learning course you took, it's a basic introductory course. You're not going to know what you need to know to solve the problem. But on this self-learning journey, what you're going to do is you're going to learn by doing. You say, okay, I'm going to solve this problem. Okay. You learn more about the problem. You find out that, okay, you need to go down this avenue. You need to create, let's say, something called a Bayesian classifier or whatever. I'm not going to like confuse the watchers, but that's like a machine learning term. So you search on Google, you figure out what that is. You go on YouTube, you watch videos about that. You learn what that is. You find out the Python libraries you need to know to code one of those up, and then you code that up, and then you research the problem more. You ask people questions, like people that are in experts in the areas of that problem. You email them. It might take you 4, 5, 6 weeks to solve the problem. But when you solve the problem, you have that under your tool belt. You have practical experience because you went out there and you, by yourself, like on your own like accord, you accumulated the resources, you contacted the people you need, you found and seeked out the education required to solve this real world problem. You're going to showcase that on your resume. In a much shorter period of time, you have more practical experience than all of these people with their years of theoretical experience doing their PhDs or master's programs. And because of that, and because of the newfound inner confidence you have that you can actually go, you confront a problem that you haven't seen before, you don't know how to solve, and then be able to teach yourself how to solve that problem. Along with that inner confidence comes like this inner worthiness, the self-worth. You feel worthy of being able to go out there. What's up?
No, go ahead.
You get this a sense of self-worth that you can go out there and you can work these jobs with really hard problems because you've shown yourself that you have what it takes to be able to practically solve a machine learning problem, something you at one point didn't know how to solve because you are self-sufficient. You know how to acquire resources. You know what you're doing. And because you have this whole one body of knowledge, 2 practical body of knowledge in machine learning, 2 practical experience, 3 inner confidence, you have everything that you need to actually go out there, kick ass in interviews at any like machine learning data science job that you want, and just like sweep up and be way more entitled and like better at the job than any of your peers that have done master's or PhD programs. This is one potential path. This is the path I would take if I were trying to go the self-learning route and getting a data science job. It does take some time, maybe 2 to 4 months of a little bit of self-study to learn the ropes, and then application and more self-learning and practical experience. But after that, you kind of have the resources you need to be able to then get the job.
Wow, that was pretty good, man. That was a pretty comprehensive plan that you laid out. I'm not sure if Rithvik is still watching, but he sure has his answer. One more question from the comments from Aman, and he says, for machine learning, you need large data sets to train your models. However, sometimes it's difficult to get valuable data from universities or the internet. For a student, how can we get more research data for building machine learning models with little capital?
That's a really good question. Huh. That's a really good question. And I have a few answers to that question. One answer is it kind of depends on what problem you're solving. So for some problems, you can actually find some pretty good, like openly available data sets to train your models. Now, it depends, like, if you want to train a really, really, really good model, then obviously you need very, very good data. And um, yeah, like when it comes to that, I think it's possible. Actually, I'm curious. The asker, what is the end that the asker wishes to achieve? So the asker wants good data to be able to train good models. And let's say, for simplicity's sake, the 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 quality of your model is in direct correlation with the quality of your data. Is the asker wanting to create a model that's good enough to put on his resume, his or her resume? Does he or she want to go out and like make the best model there is in the world for that specific subject?
Um, they didn't specify, but he did mention he was a student, so if I had to guess, I would say probably with the ends of getting Aman said for patient healthcare. So I guess it looks like um, oh, maybe that's the type of data. Yeah, Aman, if you could like what your goal is, why you want to build a model in the first place. If,
Yeah, so you want to build a model. Is it to like help you get a job? Is it to make the best model the world has ever seen for that particular purpose?
yeah, the stream has a bit of a delay, so why don't I ask you a quick bullet question while we wait for Aman to get back to us?
Sure, sure.
Okay, Darshal asks, I'm a graduate student without any experience, or I'm a graduating student without any experience, and I'll be graduating in May, aka like probably within the next couple of days. I'm looking for a full time job now, but most employers require a few years of experience. How difficult is it to get hired if you don't have any job experience?
It's as difficult as you make it for yourself. It's as difficult as you believe it to be.
Wow, nice. And okay, so Aman replied. He said the reason he wants the data is because he's trying to create a healthcare startup, an app. It's a startup idea for an app.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So that's an interesting it's an interesting end. Okay. So for that reason, Haman, I understand your concerns. So just to give some background to like other listeners, there are generally open data sets out there, but those data sets aren't very comprehensive. They're uh, at least not for most subjects, and definitely not for the subject that Haman's talking about, which is patient healthcare. They're mostly small data sets that help you prove a concept of sorts. Um, right. So, with that said, Haman, answering your question specifically, there are a few ways of going about what you want to kind of like tackle. And before I go into that, I want to preface it with one thing. The problem you're trying to solve is definitely not an easy problem, and there's a lot of people that have tried to solve it before, and I'm really glad that you're taking it upon yourself to go ahead and like make a startup and an app for this specific idea. The reason I say that is, the harder the problem is, the more valuable it feels when you end up solving it. But that doesn't dismiss the fact that it is a hard problem to solve. And because it's a hard problem to solve, you sometimes need to think outside the box for how you're going to solve it. Now, there's a few ways you can tackle this. I obviously don't know the specific thing that you are trying to do with this startup, but it is possible that you can actually come up with a machine learning model that doesn't require a lot of data. So not all machine learning models require a lot of data. It might be just general knowledge that neural nets and stuff require millions and millions of examples to properly, find a good minimum or like solve the problem with some degree of confidence. And that might be somewhat true, but if you're sharp enough and if you are willing to go the length to put in the research to come up with a very unique model, you can, depending on your problem, come up with a model that doesn't actually require that much data to be very, very good at solving whatever it sets out to solve. And I'm speaking from experience where I know specific domains where there were machine learning models, both neural net models and non-neural net models, that required like less than 100,000 examples to be able to perform almost at human level. So there's that. And you could very well be someone that invents multiple things in your startup as you try and solve this very unique problem in this unique way by creating a model that doesn't require a lot of data. Another thing you can do is approach people that do have this data, like companies, and strike deals with them. So again, depending on what problem your startup is trying to solve and what your business model is, you can have licensing deals, all kinds of deals for them to lend you data or give you some portion of their data in exchange for something. So I know this has happened once. I have had a firsthand experience of someone telling me their plan. Actually, on the other end, it was a business telling me that they wanted something from some university kids, and a really big company wanted university kids to build them something, and this was a CIO of a really big company. He told me that he was going to go to this university and give them really valuable data that this really big company had in exchange for them just building some machine learning model, etc. Wow. So in the same way, you can approach companies, just like flip this kind of thing that I'm talking about on its head. You be the one approaching companies and saying, hey, I am such and such student at like whatever, and I am setting out to build this. I will give you my services pro bono to help you with some AI project you have in exchange for you giving me X amount of data. I am open to, signing confidentiality agreements, whatever, opening up that conversation. That could be a way for you to get data. So I guess up until now, I've talked about two unique ways that have come up in my head based on past experiences that I've had solving really unique problems like the one you're talking about. Two ways on how you can go about with your startup. Wow. And getting the data set that you need.
Wow, that's a pretty. You have this really interesting way of thinking where you seem to just sort of like, um, I mean, all your ideas sound so innovative, and I think one of the reasons is you don't really see a lot of like, you sort of see through a lot of like limit or like excuses. Like for example, if I was coming up with the same type of plan, like I would have been like, well, I could do this, but I don't know if that would work. Like this wouldn't be a good idea. Like no company is able to go for that. But you sort of just you sort of just like create a plan and like make it work. Sort of make the world work around your plan type of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's that. Well, I kind of want to. I think one of the reasons I'm here is, and this is probably a theme with everything I've said up until this point, but I kind of want to inspire other people to, take on the same mentality, this invincibility attitude. Like, okay, if you want to do something, then like go get it, kind of thing.
Wow.
Like there shouldn't be anything standing in your way, and if you fail, then that's good. There's so many people they end up failing in their minds, so they never start out to begin with. Well, failure is good. Like you learn so much. Like in the time that you went back and forth between 10 different ideas you had and not really doing any of them, if you went full out on 3 of those ideas, even if you thought they were going to fail and you ended up failing, you are a totally different person at the end of those 3 ideas than you were at the outset of like the 10 ideas you're just peddling in. So spend your time like going out and like killing it and not just like making up excuses in your mind. Like even if you like think you're gonna fail, like doing something and then course correcting along the way is way better than deciding that you failed and not doing anything.
Wow. So your big sort of motto is just take action and sort of like see what happens and just go with it type of thing, right?
Yeah, just be like, I'm gonna succeed no matter what, and just like go.
Wow.
It doesn't matter if you fail because you already said you're gonna succeed no matter what. The failure is never the end until you decide that you give up. That's when the end takes place, right? And you know you're not going to do it because you know you're going to be successful. So there is only one end to your story, and that's success. So all the intermittent failures aren't actually failures. They're just stepping stones to success.
Wow. I mean, I feel like if everyone sort of had your mindset, we'd all be super successful and all be working at Google or whatever our dream job is. But all right, so all right, so I'm gonna do a little bit more. We have a bunch of questions, so we have a bunch more questions here that were asked on the Google forums. And what I want to do is, because we have so many, I was thinking maybe go do like a bullet round through all of them. Something like, you know, like try and get through these questions as fast as possible, because I know we're sort of reaching the hour point, and it's yeah, I think a lot of people are sort of. We still have a couple of people that have stayed strong and are still watching. So thanks for watching, guys. But yeah, we have a lot of questions, and these are some really good questions as well. Some of these questions are really make you think. So let's see. You up for the challenge? Do you think you can get through these questions?
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so
how many questions are there so I can pace myself?
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 questions.
All right, let's do it.
All right, let's start. So, question number 1 from Mohammed. He says, before walking into an interview, how can I test myself on my knowledge to make sure I know what I need to know?
You can't. The only thing you can be is confident in yourself or not. If you're confident in yourself, you can go in and you can handle and get out of any situation the other person throws at you. If you're not confident in yourself, then then your insecurity is gonna find a way to sabotage yourself.
Wow. So, I mean, what if someone that doesn't know programming at all walks into a programming interview, but they're like as confident as like possible? How would they do?
Well, they'll probably fail. But remember, if your end goal is success, it doesn't matter if you fail. When you fail, you learn. So now that person knows to learn programming before going into a programming interview, they'll do better the next time. And then they'll keep on going. But when people start losing out on their confidence, that's when they say, okay, I give up. And that's when the real sad story happens.
I see. Okay. Next question. When they look through your resume, what are some instant yays and nays that stand out?
So it depends on what company you're going for, and I'm assuming this is for Google. Yays are you're a competitive programmer. Yays are that you have work experience. Yays are you have like put in honest effort. If you've showcased work you've done, that's a yay. Nays are like saying I'm proficient at JavaScript and pretty good at C++. Like just write down languages that you know and don't rate yourself. That's a nay. Another nay is trying to like overly embellish your resume with like bullshit. So like having a bunch of projects that weren't really projects. Like you made like a to-do list or something and you put that on your resume. No, like instead of like doing 4 different projects just to make your resume look big, do one really good project, have a link to it in your resume, make it easy for the recruiter to check it out and be impressed and like make you memorable in your mind.
Nice. Okay, Meet for question number 3 and 4. Meet says, can you talk a bit about how you landed your Google interview and what the process was like?
I had a friend working at Google. I gave him a referral to Twitter. He gave me a referral to Google. Yeah, I had my work experience at Twitter, so I went through a pretty traditional route for that. What's the other part of the question, the second half?
And then he also said, what was the process like?
Process, so for those of you not familiar with Google's process, it's 2-pronged. You have your initial... So I went through... I guess he's asking specifically for my case, and I had 2 phone interviews, after which I was invited to the matching stage, so where you get matched with a team. So I didn't have any on-site interviews because I first came on as an intern, and in the matching phase I had several phone interviews, maybe 4-ish, and those were interviews with different teams, and the team I liked best, which was the machine learning team I ended up working on, I liked that team. So after that interview, I told my recruiter, I want to work on this team. And my recruiter's like, okay, yeah, they want you to work on their team as well. And it was a match. So there's basically 2 steps in the Google process, whether it's as an intern or full-time. The beginning is getting into the inner pool, the matching pool. And then once you're there, you get matched into a team, and then you actually start working. So there's 2 sets of interviews. And in my case, because I started as an intern and while on the job got converted to full-time, I only had to do 2 phone interviews before I went into the matching stage. For normal full-time people, it's, I believe, any number of phone interviews. It could be, I think, between 1 and 3. I'm not entirely sure. And then there's a round of on-site interviews.
Wow. Okay. And then the second question from Meet, he says, how many hours of coding in general, oh, you're going to love this one, how many hours of coding in general do you recommend for things that are not related to data structures and algorithms, but outside that sort of domain as well?
I think as many hours as you feel like. I think you should be coding if you enjoy it, and if you don't enjoy it, not code it. I don't think needing to know how to code, like in general, is that much of a necessity. But what I do think you should do is you should build some projects and allocate as much time to building those projects out as necessary. So it could be, building a relatively complex website or a mobile app with a back end. What that does is it helps you prepare for design interviews. Design interviews ask you for things like, oh, how would you set up your API, et cetera, et cetera. So if someone ends up throwing out a question like that outside of the algorithms and data structures, kind of environment or like that, like carve that specific niche, someone throws out like a design question, you'll be more comfortable engaging that question. So short answer, spend 0+ hours, just spend as much as you want building a project that you have some curiosity or passion toward, and use that to help you build up your design knowledge. And that's the only reason I would do it. If I was doing it for any other reason, it would only be because I enjoyed doing it.
Wow. Okay. Ron says, "What's the biggest challenge you see? What is the biggest challenge you see today with engineers coming out of college?"
I think it goes back to the limiting beliefs we talked about earlier in this call.
Okay. And his second question is, what is your most effective way of self-studying new technologies?
I think it's what I talked about with the self-learning for the data science stuff, or the machine learning stuff, sorry. I will take some formal education or a conversation with someone that is an expert or at least somewhat proficient in the field I want to learn about, just so I understand some basic terms and have some foundational knowledge. And then I seek out practical experience doing some kind of practical project independently or for someone else, either in a paid capacity or voluntary capacity. And while I build out that project, I use Google. Google is my best friend, and I seek out other educational resources from the internet to learn what I need to learn to see that project through to the end.
I see. Oh, Meat clarified on his previous question. He said, I meant Google asks problems outside of the box, like probability stuff, and ties to algorithm questions. He said that's what they asked for in his interview. So I guess that's what he meant when he said how many hours. Yeah.
Oh, good. Good question, Meat. I think. I think it's probably not as much of a question of hours. I think you should set out to learn about as many things Google can potentially test you on as possible. And then, based on what you've gathered in your research, so there's algorithm data structures, probabilities like you mentioned, there's the design question like I talked about. I know there's like big data questions that Google sometimes asks. You kind of make a list of all of that, and then you basically make yourself proficient in each one, or at least make yourself put yourself up to a certain level of confidence in each one. So when it does come time for the interview, you can at least talk intelligently about it. The truth is, you can never know every single question. Like, there will always be some question you haven't heard of, but you can make yourself confident enough to, in the interview, be able to reason about the question and show the interviewer that you have critical thinking skills, critical problem solving skills, and a good way of actually attacking the question, which is really what these interviewers are looking for, is your thinking process, and your communication skills, not your ability to actually solve the question. It's, your fundamentals, like how well you know programming or probabilities or big data. So it's really make yourself proficient in the foundation for as many things as you think Google can tackle, can possibly approach you with. And yeah, so not so much splitting your hours, but spend as much time as you need to until you feel confident that you can act intelligibly if a question for that specific domain comes up in your interview.
Okay, nice. So Vishesh says, how do you get a strong grasp on machine learning models? I think you sort of went over this one. What do you think?
To be honest, I think very, very few people have a strong grasp on machine learning models. So I don't think it's, as surprising as this is, I don't think it's something that's too big of a worry if you don't have a strong grasp of like what a neural net exactly is. I'm telling you, people at Google working in machine learning, not all of them necessarily have a strong intuitive grasp on what it is.
Okay.
But if you wanted, if you wanted to get that strong grasp, I think one way to go about it is to really understand the math behind it. So make an effort to understand the linear algebra behind what's happening. Another way might be to find someone that does have a strong grasp on it and have that person explain it to you. So Albert Einstein said something along the lines of, if you can't explain something simply, it means you don't know that thing very well. And the people that do have a strong grasp of these things can explain them simply enough for anyone to understand it. And there are very few people like that, but if you go around searching enough, you will find one of them.
Okay. Next question is, where do you find machine learning / data science problems which you can practice? Some specific books, websites, or something else? I linked Kaggle in the comments, by the way.
Yeah, Kaggle is one. Specifically because I'm not in the field or in the particular part of my career to be seeking out these problems, I'm actually not the best person to ask. But I'm sure if you go on to any Facebook machine learning group or machine learning subreddit on Reddit and ask the question there, or even just search this up on Google, you'll find a number of really good resources.
Okay. So next two questions from Tabish. Tabish says, what's one thing on resumes that employers find really great?
Good question. The answer is work experience. I mean, I think
22.
Yeah, I think one thing my hiring manager at Twitter, what he told me, he found very impressive, or something that really stood out on my resume, was the fact that I had done a project with a team and that it's working and running. It shows that not only enough to deliver a project and keep it running and keep it live and have a user base, but that you can resolve arguments, you can work with a team, and that you can together actually, come out successful. Because that's literally what you're expected to do day after day after day when you're working a job. for these companies.
Wow.
So yeah, any project that can showcase that is amazing, and I believe that was the only project, or maybe one of two projects I had on my resume when I didn't have work experience going to Twitter.
Wow. That's something I never even thought about. That employers would really look for. A project like you said, that's up and running with teamwork. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. Okay, so our next question from Shubi says, "What's the best thing to learn for machine learning that helps when applying for internships?"
For machine learning internships?
And I guess his second question is sort of an add-on. He says, AI and ML is a really vast field and it has many branches. What is the best branch to follow for an absolute beginner that optimizes your chances of getting an internship?
Ooh, yeah. Okay, so one, it is a very fast-moving field, and for that reason, um, this like if I were to answer this, it could be outdated, by the end of the year, by the end of the quarter. That's one. Two, I'm pretty sure most of like the really big areas of machine learning, so like computer vision, image understanding, that area, the whole speech, those two areas are really big and obviously really in demand. So speech understanding and image understanding, I think, are probably your best bets. And as far as I'm concerned, those are really the biggest. And there are a few other big ones. I guess there's also healthcare style stuff. That's also really good. And his add-on, or was that the add-on?
Yeah, that was pretty much the add-on. Which sort of branch of machine learning should you focus on to help you get it?
Did I cover his original question?
Yeah, pretty much. I guess they're sort of the same question. Yeah. Okay. I guess next question then. Jack says, okay, this will be. And he says, "How did you learn everything you know?"
Literally just the same way. I practice what I preach. So this idea of going out and building a project, then doing it, is pretty much what I did.
Oh,
unless he's talking about.
Sorry, yeah. Go on. So go on.
Yeah, so it's basically that. It's basically the way I like to do it is I either search up some introductory YouTube videos. I don't even go as far as taking like a full on like Coursera course, like a few YouTube videos to help me learn some basic terms to be able to then use Google to find what I need to find, or talking to someone. It might be an acquaintance or someone I get in touch with on the internet, or even like asking on Reddit, like, oh, tell me a little bit about this, or explain like I'm 5, how this works. Understanding the basics of something I need to know, whether it's JavaScript, front-end development, machine learning, database optimization, parallel programming, all these different things that I know about. I figure out some of the basic things, and then I do a specific project that ends up requiring practical skills in that field, and then I end up learning those practical skills, and that's how I know everything I know.
Wow, I like that a lot. Oh, Sumya asked a sort of clarifying question on the question you answered a bit before, which was what was the one thing that employers find on your resume that's really, really good, and your answer was the whole project with other people. She says, does a hackathon sort of fall under that category as a project that's working or up and running with other people?
I would say no. I think this hackathon thing has really been beaten to the death, and like everyone and their brother has their hackathon projects on their resumes. I think a key thing I said back there was having that project where you work with a team and like it's live and kind of has a user base, like it's successful.
I see.
So that kind of means like not only did you have like your team work on it and build it, like your team kind of also like went through with it, and like emotions or lack of ability to be a good team member either on yourself or your teammates didn't end up ripping this whole thing like apart. That's one. And like another thing, when you have a non-hackathon project up there that's kind of polished and stuff, because you rarely see that nowadays. The specific thing, really, what I'm talking about, this kind of having a polished project with, it doesn't have to have a big user base. Even like 10 or 20 users is fine. That's so unheard of. Like, I actually can't even name a single person off the top of my head that has had that on their resume. I don't know if you can, Anthony.
No, nope.
It's just going through, like when you do that, it just shows that you're serious and like you've put your time and effort into this and like saw it through. So yeah, I think it's kind of specifically what I said about the user base thing that differentiates it a lot from the hackathon. Doesn't mean it can't be a hackathon project specifically. Like if you took that hackathon project, you made it go live, you polished it up a bit and got users, that's perfect. It fits into that, into what I'm saying. But most hackathon projects simply aren't that. So the short answer is no, and the longer answer is kind of what we just covered.
Okay. All right. Next question, also from Jackie, says, "What background did you have in software development, and I guess you already answered that, but the second part of that question is, what do you think stood out to Google the most? I guess about you and your background."
What stood out to Google the most? I think what stood out the most was I performed really well on my interviews. So once you're in the matching stage, there are three sources of data, I guess. Yeah, three sources of data that teams are looking at when about you when they're making the decision on whether or not to hire you. And one of those is how well you performed in the technical interviews. The second one is your resume and your Google questionnaire. So when you get into this stage in Google, you answer a questionnaire on what you want to work on at Google and why you want to work on those things. So I talked about why I wanted to work on something that challenged me, and I wanted to work in like such and such. I'm not going to go into the whole thing. It's kind of a long, it's going to stretch this out longer than I think we have time for. And then the third source of information they have is how other teams have interviewed you. So when you're in the matching stage, you're interviewing with different teams, and then you're deciding whether you want to work on that team. And simultaneously, that team decides whether they want you to work on their team. So it's only when both people say yes do you get assigned to that team. And on the first few teams that I interviewed with, I specifically interviewed with like the manager or my would-be manager, and I think I managed to impress those people a lot with my soft skills that kill it at Google, and I'm really, really ambitious, etc. And I think Google saw that in me, and for that reason, they were like, okay, we're going to take a chance with him, and we're going to put him on this. He says he wants to work on this. He says he's going to do really great things, and he's done really great things at Twitter. So I did exceptionally well at my time in Twitter, and had very good feedback from the people I worked from there. All of this kind of backed me up, and that's kind of what Google saw in me.
Wow. Okay. So the last question is from Shantanu. Oh, sorry, last question. And they say, I'm working as a computer vision and machine learning intern at a startup. How should I improve my profile to get into Google's AI team?
Well, I think, first of all, congrats on your current position. I think the way to improve your profile is to kill it at your job. Like, make such a huge lasting impact on your job that a few bullet points on your resume, like that, like do so good at the job, make such a large impact at that company. And it's great that you're at a startup because it's usually easier to do this at startups than it is at larger companies. Make such a large impact that then when it comes to your resume, in just a few bullet points, you completely blow away the anyone that's reading your resume. Like, for example, I know someone who did really well, that they were able to say stuff like on their resume that, oh, I was the tech lead for the largest or the second largest research project existing at this company, and this company is Google. Another bullet point was they increased the efficiency of this research project by 17x, saving Google like 2,000 software engineer hours per day in computing costs or something like that. So just your company that, like, you just feel like your profile has been improved. Like, you didn't have to go out and get achievements. You just, did such a good job that now you feel inside yourself that you're an absolute killer and you're totally worthy of this job at Google. And everyone at that company also believes that you're totally kick butt, and they would like totally vouch for you. If you were to write that on your resume, you'd be like, yeah, this man is being humble about it. He could have been a lot more, like a lot more cocky on like what he wrote on his resume, because he's just completely kicked ass at our company. So yeah, just do that. Like, if you do that, then you should be totally fine in getting your job at Google in the forthcoming round of internships or your full-time, whatever you're going for next.
Awesome. And now the last question from Ryan. He says, how do you strike a balance between the theoretical and practical aspects of machine learning?
Good question, Ryan. I haven't consciously tried to strike a balance. I will let you know what I just happen to do, and then you can decide for yourself whether that's something you also want to do. So one thing to realize is when it comes to machine learning, not a lot of people really understand that theory well. It goes back to what I said earlier. There's just not a lot of people that actually understand neural nets at a really, really intuitive level, such that they can explain the concept with immense clarity to someone else that isn't familiar with the subject. There's just very few people like that. Even people that are working in the top positions. And the reason for that is, when it comes to machine learning, the reality of the situation is the majority of machine learning positions are actually people that have practical machine learning skills. And that is basically very easy. I honestly think to some degree machine learning could be easier than a lot of regular software engineering jobs, because what you have to do is be able to, test data sets, see if your model is overfitting, if it's underfitting, um, you know, be able to tweak variables, being able to tweak your learning rate. It's basically testing out different things until your model ends up working. That's literally what most machine learning um, specialists, whatever you want to call them, are doing. There's only very few people that actually know like what's going on, and those are the people that are coming up with like groundbreaking inventions and innovations in the field. So it depends. What are you setting out to do? If you're setting out to just like get a machine learning job, like a data, like whatever, like a basic job that ironically pays much better than software engineer, like basic software engineering jobs, even though they might be a lot easier. You only need to know very little theory and mostly the practical stuff on how to tune your machine learning models. If you're trying to go out and be like a really, really competent machine learning specialist, um, then you want to actually spend enough time in the theory that you have an intuitive understanding of how these machine learning models work for whatever purpose that or like your area of interest, or if it's for computer vision, understanding the specific models in that area. And then when you have that intuitive understanding, that's when you can start to make like innovative changes to like the actual models and the AIs as a part, like other than, sorry, making these really innovative changes to these models as opposed to just tweaking variables and marginally improving what's already been created by other people.
Okay. Wow, I think you did it. You got through all of the questions pretty much. Yeah, I mean, I think those were some pretty insightful answers. And I mean, do you have any other advice that you just want to put out there before we end the stream, or any advice for everyone watching?
Yeah, I think don't really think that much about doing things and stop trying to figure out what exactly it is that you need to do and spend more time actually doing, and then let your act of doing help teach you what you needed to know. So by going out and like doing things and learning things about machine learning and trying to solve machine learning problems, on that, let that journey actually help you figure out like the things that you needed to know, and like the specific, tools of the trade and resources that you need to like really propel yourself in this career. Because to be honest, no one person knows about all the best resources or knew about all the best resources when they're starting out. I can tell you, maybe like I'm sure there are people that had many good, maybe even great resources available to them because their friends told them about them, but no one had the absolute perfect portfolio of absolute best resources, and that's the reason they were successful. No, they were successful because they actually went out and did something, right? So don't try to figure out what the best way is or the best thing you need to do to get to where you need to go. Just start moving in that direction, and then figure out and acquire those resources along the way.
Wow. Wow, I think that was, yeah. Jeez. Just dropping bombs of wisdom, man. Um, but yeah, I guess that covers everything. thank you so much once again for coming on and answering all these questions and really giving us all a lot to think about. And yeah, man, I mean, this was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope people have garnered something of value.